This is Pod Populi.
Podcast for the people.
The Great Love Debate. It's the Great Love Debate.
The Great Love Debate. It's the Great Love Debate.
Hi again, everyone. It's Brian Howie. Welcome to The Great Love Debate, the world's #1 dating and relationship podcast. Since 2015, I am back in the very fine studios of Pod Populi, podcast for the people. I'm at the one in Scottsdale, Arizona, and it is the full Scottsdazzle going on here at this time of year. So if you have the means, roll on out to the Valley of the Sun, because it is lovely. So a lot of times this past year, we have dealt with relationships more than dating stuff. We have gotten really into why people come together and why people fall apart and why people should have stayed together and why people should not have broken up. And we've taken a lot of different avenues to that. And what I've noticed is a lot of times something will bring two people together, whether it's a incident or a trauma or a moment or a move or a job or something that forces people to sort of assess where they are in their life and if they want to be with a certain person. And sometimes that's the opposite. And sometimes things cause a rift in a relationship that really isn't about the relationship. It's just about two people taking a moment and being like, where are we? What is it? And so, the movie Speed, those two people, Speed, is that a dated reference? That's like 30 years old now. But they were stuck on a bus and it was hijacked and they fell in love. But then, he wasn't in Speed 2. So perhaps it didn't really work out after all. But they were thrown together and there was chaos and trauma and they fall in love. And sometimes chaos and trauma make people fall out of love. And so this is kind of a long, winding way to bring in my guest here. And I'm not saying she's going to really reveal too many of her cards on how that affected her, but she had a fork in the road in her life brought about by, is trauma a good word? I don't know. She's the host of the To Be Continued podcast because she believes life is to be continued. Romy Wightman, how are you?
Thanks, Brian. I'm great. How are you?
So your story started where you were living a fairly calm existence with your family, and then one day, what happened?
So I think you never really live a totally calm existence, especially when you're married, you have 3 kids, you have jobs. But in my case, it was pretty normal,
right?
Same typical life. And then unexpectedly, out of the blue, I was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. And at the time I think my youngest was 12, which meant then I had a 14 and a 15-year-old. So life was really busy at that time. And stage 4 colon cancer becomes a full-time job.
And you were healthy, you were
I thought I was
symptomless.
I thought I was really healthy.
Your vegetables. And then one day it's like, I don't feel great.
So I think that's a huge misconception for those that have never been diagnosed with cancer.
Because we always wonder what is going on in stages 1, 2, and 3 that you don't notice anything.
So I wonder that myself, and I still don't have the answer. But there is a common saying in the colon cancer community, and probably in other cancer communities, I was really healthy until I got cancer. And the fact of the matter is you weren't, because there's a reason that you got cancer. But I think the more that they study and learn about cancer is there can be things going on inside of your body, like inflammation or just different things that are you wouldn't think twice of it. And then it just presents itself as a cancer. But it's not going to present itself on a basic blood test, or if somebody's listening to your heart, or if you can go out and run 10 miles.
The first sign that something's wrong, again, not to generalize cancer, there's 100 different ways to look at cancer and 100 different cancers, is some sort of fatigue. Is lethargy sort of the first sign?
I think it's different for every single person and every single cancer, and that's what makes cancer so difficult.
What led you to go to the hospital?
So I was
doctor.
I was training for the Ragnar Trail Run, and we were in the mountains doing a run, and I did a 7-mile run. And at the end of it, I just kind of felt like I was starting to maybe get a cold or get sick. I just wasn't recovering as fast as I normally do. So a couple days later, I went and did it again. And the same thing. I was like, I'm just not recovering. But I wasn't tired. Wasn't like anything else about my life
So it
was
wasn't
different.
I worked out hard feeling.
No, it was. There was something that was different about it, and it caused me to go to the doctor. And to make a long story short, that was in January, February. I got diagnosed in October. So however many months that is, that's how long it took to chase down what was going on.
Huh. So that's 9 months or so of, because the symptoms weren't severe enough that, like, oh my, you don't fast forward to cancer. You
Right.
start like, oh, maybe she has
Well, you and we did
Epstein-Barr, you know?
Right. So I did a podcast episode about it with my primary care doctor, where she was kind of going back and talking about it from her perspective. So here this person presents, not yet 50, not overweight, fit, just, is running 7 miles in the mountains, not complaining of really any symptoms other than not recovering quickly from strenuous exercise. So what do you do with that? You do a bunch of blood tests. They all come back normal because you don't know what you're looking for.
Cancer doesn't show up in any way in a blood test. There's not a elevated count of some kind, is there?
If you're testing the right thing, but it's not, if you're getting a regular CBC, you know what your doctor is normally doing, they're not testing for cancer markers.
And they were like, I don't know how old you were at the time. You weren't quite 50. But is it like, oh, it's hormones? It's, they look at the day-to-day stuff first, right?
They do. They look at whatever is the most obvious, and nothing was immediately going, it's colon cancer. So,
had you had a colonoscopy?
No, because
the audience is like, how's this going to get into the love stuff? We will get there shortly. There's a circuitous route we're taking to this, but so I brought up the stage 4 thing. If on day 1 you went in there, January, February, whatever that year was, and they tested for cancer, is it then at stage 1 or stage 2, or it doesn't work that way?
It does not work that way. And I only know about colon cancer, so other cancers could be different, but typically colon cancers are around for 8 to 10 years before you know it.
8 to 10 years?
Yeah, it's kind of scary.
What? So what do we do about that?
So
8 to 10 years before you notice it, what is going on? Is anything detectable in 2 years, or is it just colonoscopy and that's...
So in standard colon cancer, it would be a polyp that you would get detected in a colonoscopy. And then the polyp starts out benign and then it turns cancerous. But in the majority of cancers, cancer is present for many years before it starts to show any symptoms. So if we all did colonoscopies really early, then maybe you could prevent it. Now it's age 45 that it's recommended.
Yeah, I think we will have... The problem with colonoscopies is they're very elaborate, obviously very invasive or whatever. 10 years, hopefully there's a simpler way to do
Correct.
that. That's always a funding issue. Do you direct the funds to testing and screening, or you just divert the funds to cure? And that's always a battle in the medical communities, but that's a different show too. Okay, so you get diagnosed, I have stage 4 colon cancer. Your first instinct is what? Your first reaction is to do what?
My first reaction is just complete shock and panic. And I think I was paralyzed. I don't think I did anything. I mean, it really took some time to process. I felt like I was living...
Do you remember your first question? Do you say, what does that mean? How long do I have? What are the questions rolling off? Or you're just like, okay, good, thank you, and then you go home and process it? What is the...
So I'm one of those people that it takes me a minute to process anything, whether it's colon cancer, whether it's a meeting, and it just takes me a minute to process. So I think for me, it took me quite some time to process. And I just wanted to have surgery and get the tumor out as fast as possible because they didn't know it was stage 4 at the time of the colonoscopy.
Stage 4 means what? It gets into a second location? Is that
correct?
Okay. And it was in the bones? It was in an organ?
It was in my liver, but we didn't know that until my very first surgery. So I had a PET scan prior to that surgery, and I was in the operating room waiting to go into surgery. And my surgeon comes in, and he was so calm and so chill. And he goes, by the way, he said, something did light up on the PET scan. I'm not that worried about it. We'll check it out. Let's just get through the surgery, and then we'll figure it out afterwards. So, I mean, I'm almost going to sleep, and this guy's telling me,
You're like, wait, what?
Something showed up in your liver. Don't you worry about it.
Huh. And how is your family at this time taking this information? Are they worried? Are they trying to calm you down? Are you trying to calm them down? What is the reaction of your husband and kids?
So I'll start with the kids because I was very vague with them in the beginning because I didn't want to scare any of them. So I basically presented it as they found cancer. We're going to take care of it. I don't know what this means long term, but it's nothing to worry about. And I acted very normal. I didn't miss a beat. So they didn't, I don't think they were that worried at the time. Scott, my husband at the time, he was pretty good in the beginning. I don't think he was completely freaked out.
Legitimately, or are they trying to not get freaked out to keep you calm? Or you don't really know?
I have no idea.
Which way does that? I don't, because you're doing it both ways. You're trying not to freak them out.
Yeah.
They're trying not to freak you out.
We were freaked out. Let's be real.
Yeah.
We were freaked out, but I don't think we weren't in panic mode.
Huh.
So
you did not know the word stage 4 at that point.
I didn't.
Right.
I had no idea, but that
you colon cancer. We're going to do some surgery and we're going to try and get it out.
Yes.
Then when it moves to, liver involved, does the panic go up and you start writing a will? Like, what happens then?
The panic went up a lot. It really did. It was one spot in my liver, and they weren't sure if it was cancer or it was something different. And so I went to see this liver surgeon. He was like the top liver transplant surgeon in Phoenix. And he said, I don't like the way this looks. I don't care if it's benign. I think we need to get it out. And so at that time, I was still operating in shock. I think you and I did my very first podcast episode, and I don't think I have words to describe what I was actually feeling, but the overarching feeling that I had was, I just don't have a vibe this is going to take me out. But then I would second guess myself. I was like,
are you Googling?
Oh yeah, I'm doing a ton of research,
Which is good and bad.
Yeah, I'm doing a ton of
Right.
research. But when I would go to bed at night, I was just like, I just don't think this is going to take me out. But in the day, you're Googling and you're freaking yourself out, and it takes a long time to come to terms with both of those things and put them together so you can get up every day. And
when do you start bargaining? Like, just give me 2 years.
I
just
never
give me
did.
5 years. You didn't do that. I just want to
No.
see my daughter get married. You don't do stuff like that.
So I did want 5 years, but it wasn't bargaining. I didn't pray and say, give me 5
Was it
years and
goal
I will
setting?
do this.
What was the 5 years in your head then?
The 5 years was, I honestly felt like I needed to parent these kids until my youngest went to high school. And so I would say for me, the bargaining was, you need to do whatever you have to do to make it for the 5 years. But I didn't do anything extreme. It was just a lot of internal,
All right.
just internal talk
All
to
right.
keep myself off the ledge.
Well, we are going to get into the crux of the marriage part of that in a second. I got to take a quick break. I'm here with Romy Wightman. She's the host of To Be Continued, that podcast, which you need to check out. We will plug that at the end of this one, but I got to take a quick break. This podcast will be continued, and we will be back right after this. And we are back, and we are talking love and cancer. So your husband at the time, there's sort of two ways you can do this there's probably 100 ways to do this as a cancer patient. But when you go through a crisis, it's either you go into complete survival mode and say, everybody get away from me, or you are like, I need everybody. And that can happen with anybody. That can happen with, if you're a parent and your child is going through something, you're like, I don't have the energy to give to a relationship right now. Get away from me. You could go, it could be like, I'm starting a new job. This is too stressful. And to have to think about a partner's needs could do it. It could be the opposite. It's like, I'm moving and I need my partner more than ever. What are you looking for out of your spouse during this?
So at this time in our lives, I had two girls that were doing competitive dance, one son that was doing AAA hockey, and I had a full-time job and I was the breadwinner. And I have stage 4 colon cancer. So what I'm doing is just trying to get through each day, because that's all I have the bandwidth
A whirlwind
for.
of activities with these kids. Yeah.
Just nonstop. And so with Scott, my ex-husband, I'm leaning on him for support, but
You just gave away the ending, but go ahead.
oh, sorry.
I think they knew it was coming, but go
Sorry.
ahead.
But
That's the reveal. Spoiler alert. Okay.
But I'm also trying to keep things normal. So you have me, I'm like, I don't know if I'm in denial, but I'm not really focusing on the cancer, because I think if I focus on it too much, then that becomes my identity. So I'm trying to, like with Scott, he was pretty optimistic. He's like, you're going to be fine. But he really was never the guy that's going to sit down and have an hour-long conversation about how scared you are.
Because that's just the way he is, or that's the
just-
way your relationship was?
I think both. I think that's the way.
Right. Some people don't want to do that. If you don't take the time to talk about it, it will go away, or you don't have to deal with it.
Right.
And so at some point you're like, I'm going to deal with it, or I'm going to sort of have the internal conversation that we're not having, or what?
So this went on for 4 years. So I have to kind of go backwards. There were a lot of different phases and different stages. In the beginning, I think I was okay with that. I was like, we don't need to sit down and talk about it all night. But as things got more serious and as things progressed, then I started getting really worried. Like, this could go to hell in a handbag. I need to make sure you can raise these kids. I need to make sure you know where the important documents are. I mean, I need to just start checking off some boxes.
Make breakfast. You mean how, like, you don't know what the other, marriages, partnerships have roles.
Right.
And if you look at it like they might have to do my job,
Yeah.
can they? Will they?
And I didn't have time to teach him because I had too many things on my plate.
Right. Are you having that conversation? Like, if something happens to me.
So when those conversations started, every time I had a total of 8 surgeries. So before each surgery, I would walk him to the file cabinet and I would open up the drawers and I would say, this is where the personal documents are. This is where the life insurance is. I would pull it out and I would say, this is what you have to do. And he didn't want to focus on it.
And I don't blame him either.
don't-
That's not just a coping mechanism for him, but it's too scary.
Yes.
Yeah.
But from my perspective, he would be walking backwards out the door as I was trying to explain where all these documents were.
Right.
So then my fear and anxiety would start getting so much higher because I was like, he's not listening to me. I need him to be able to take care of these kids. I need him to be able to get the life insurance money. So at some point, I created a trust and I created all this stuff. And I sent it to my sister. kept it with the attorney, and I was like, here's where everything is, because Scott is not focusing on what needs to be done here.
Did you say that? Say like,
No.
I don't think you're focusing, or you're
No.
just like that? I don't have energy for that.
I just didn't have the energy, and he knew it.
Yeah.
I mean, at that point we'd been married for 20 years. We knew how each other operated.
Right. And you'd settle into roles and routines,
And I think Scott also kind of had that, well, Romy will take care of it. She'll fix it. She fixes everything.
right.
And then when I was the person that needed to be fixed, I just don't think he knew what to do with it.
Did he try? He's like, can I
He did try.
boil water? I mean, you're not having a baby, or can I
He
get
did
towel?
try.
He did.
So he was always there physically, always. After every surgery, he'd be at the grocery store. He was always there and available. He wasn't there emotionally. If I would need to have a conversation, if I would need to cry, if whatever, that's when he would check out. But physically, he was there and willing to do whatever needed to be done.
And so he was stepping up, or it was status quo? How did you perceive your partner at the time going through this? Other than him not really paying attention to the serious stuff, but you're like, he's there for me? Or you're like, how much of him do I want there for me? Like, you're doing that math the whole time too. Is he going to be a help or a hindrance, or let me go through this and calm it, you know?
I think there's a couple of things there. I always knew Scott would be there for me if I really needed something.
Right.
He's an acts of service guy. So for him to mop my floors when I can't stand up because I have surgery, that's the way he shows love. And I think if you go backwards in our relationship, it really starts there. You don't know it at the time, but after it, you go backwards and you go, and maybe I could have predicted that when we had a large crisis, we weren't going to be great together at handling it.
Because the acts of service were not what you needed? What did you need?
So I need somebody to assure me that things are going to be okay. And to me, that means if I die, I need to really know that you can take care of the kids, both physically, financially, and emotionally.
So those are the words of assurance you need, not you're going to be fine.
Not I'm going to be fine, and not let me mop the floors, because that's going to make everything okay.
Right.
So I remember very clearly one night I said, have you sat down with the kids and just had a conversation, just you and them, that if something happens, everything's going to be okay? And he said no. Did
you say, can you do that? Or you didn't want to have to say, can you do that?
I think I did say it. And then I think he said something to the effect of, we'll deal with that when the time comes. And that comment, I remember it like it was yesterday. That was when things turned.
That one comment, you're just like, he doesn't get what I need right now, both as a caretaker of a family, as a dad, and just, you needed to be assured, not that you were going to be okay, because nobody could assure you of that.
Right.
You need to be assured that if you were not okay, the family.
Yes.
And he didn't either understand it, or he didn't have a way to sort of eloquently express that.
Exactly. And that put such tremendous pressure and stress on me, because
which you did not need.
I did not need. So every day thereafter, I was like, holy shit, I got to find a way to live for 5 years, because I can't count on what's going to happen if I don't. And you know what? Maybe it was a blessing in disguise, because that was 8 years ago.
I know. So that's the illumination. That's the spotlight, the incubator, if you will. This crisis moment, and it's not a. I mean, maybe it is. It's a breach of trust, Is that what it is? Because you're like, not being able to count on your partner is probably the worst feeling in the world.
Right.
And it's one thing, there's, lots of ways to slice that. There's not counting on them because either they're not trustworthy or they can't. It's another thing to be like, I cannot trust them to understand the gravity of the situation or what we need. And that can be if it's just the two of you, there's 5 of you in the family, there's
Right.
so many moving parts, and you're like, this is a fork in the road in our relationship that I am not ready to take and just trust that it's going to work out. He's going to take the right path.
Right. And it just completely changed everything for me. It changed my outlook on our marriage. It changed my outlook on my disease state. It changed my outlook on little things. I remember like probably 6-8 years before that, I had to go to this weekend business thing. And my kids are really close in age. Mm-hmm. So at some point I had a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 5-year-old. That's a handful. Wow. And I was gone all day on a Saturday. And I came back and I said, what'd you guys do today? Do you know what they did? He took them to hike Piestewa Peak. And for those of you that don't live here or have never hiked Piestewa Peak, mm-hmm. It is not meant for a 2-year-old. Oh. There's
so it's
cliffs.
Too ambitious for a 2-year-old.
It's one down from Camelback Mountain.
Okay.
And apparently my 5-year-old slid and started sliding down the mountain, and somebody coming up had to grab her because he was holding a 2-year-old.
Right.
Lord only knows what my son was doing. And it just kind of brought me back to, oh my gosh, I cannot trust this whole situation.
So you went on not with that mindset, but you were making choices and decisions in your everyday life not to put him in a position where he had to.
Yes.
So you're like, I'm not going to leave him with that. I'm not going to do this. And then when the cancer crisis happens, you're like, I might not be around to keep them off of the cliff.
And the scary part is you don't really realize you're doing that mm-hmm. over the years until something.
You're always the training wheels.
Yeah. And all of a sudden I had this light bulb moment, and I was like, you have enabled this for a lot of years. And
so is that a conversation right away after he says that, or do you just check out and move into a different direction and you don't?
So he said that again as he was walking out the door. And so that meant we're not talking about it anymore. And I just remember sitting in my room sobbing. I mean, I think I only cried during this like twice, and I was so scared. I mean, it mm-hmm. will make me cry right now. That's how scared I was.
So you're thinking 2 things. I have to beat this. Mm-hmm. And if I do beat this, this is the end of the road. When are you thinking that for the marriage?
So I'm not thinking I have to beat this. I'm thinking you have
Still 5 years. Yeah.
I'm just thinking 5 years. You just have to be conscious and aware for 5 years. Doesn't matter what state you're in. You just have to be conscious. Keep the kids off the mountain for 5 years. And no, I was not thinking about getting divorced or leaving my marriage, but that was the moment that I really started thinking, okay, you got to figure out what you want to do from here going forward. You may live for a year, you may live for 6, you may live for you have no idea. Mm-hmm. But it was, I don't know how to say this any other way than, having a experience where you think you might die mm-hmm. is really sometimes a gift.
I had that. I talked about that on the podcast. Well, I was in a pretty bad car accident a couple years ago, and I lived, mm-hmm. and but I had to, at the time, like I could have died. It was like a fraction where I could have died, and I was like, how long would it take anybody to notice, other than maybe like one person? I was like, how long, if I had died, how long would it take anybody to notice, and how long would it take anybody to care? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, there aren't enough people that I know that I have in my life that would notice or care for way too long. And I thought I have to make some changes in attitude towards people, the relationships I have, find out who's important, find out what I mean, and find out why I would even think that.
Right.
It was a bad thing to think. So that was about my relationships and who mattered to me and who was going to run down the road for me and in my moment of crisis. And so you're alive, so you survived, you beat cancer. When do you...
Well, I didn't beat it.
That's a bad phrase. What is the term? You're alive and not well?
I just say, I will be cured from cancer when I die from something else.
Okay, well, stay out of traffic. When does it take the turn of we have to talk about our marriage? Are you undergoing treatment? Is it in the heart of that or you waited till you were stable?
So treatment was off and on and surgeries and complications for years. And so at some point during that, I was really worn down. I mean, the treatment wears you down, the surgeries wear you down. I worked throughout the whole thing. I still had these kids that, I'm parenting. And so I remember being in Chicago at a business meeting, and I was on the plane, and I just remember thinking, you can stay in this marriage and you'll be fine. Mm-hmm. Nobody's abusing you. Nobody's cheating on you. Nobody's stealing from you. But you're just letting life pass you by. You don't know how much longer you have.
Right.
And every day you stay in a situation that you're resentful and you're not living your fullest life is a day you're letting great pass you by.
Right.
So that's what I was thinking. And I had several conversations with Scott. Like, my parents got divorced, and I remember my mom didn't really clue my dad in that she wasn't happy. And I swore that if ever anything happened, I was going to be really brutally honest and give it my best college try to fix it. Right. So these conversations went on for a couple of years. And then
before you hit the 5-year mark.
Yeah.
Right. So you're then thinking like, do I have these conversations or do I just shut up for 5 years till I make it to 5 years? That's got to be hard too. Right?
It was really hard because, at some point I figured out that stress breeds cancer, and I needed to do something to get my stress level down. And I couldn't be resentful and I couldn't be angry at him every day. And I was. And so every time I would get resentful and I would get angry, I was like, you are hurting your health. You've got to find a way to get out of this.
Cut that cancer out.
Yeah.
And so you tell him, is he like, what? We're in this cancer. What are you talking about? Or is he like, I know?
He knows. And he's really trying to do what he can do to make things right. And I think at the end of the day, a lot of us got married in our 20s. We didn't have 2 dimes to scrape together. We didn't have any stress. We didn't have kids. You can't predict how someone is going to react to that kind of stuff.
And you can't beat yourself up if you didn't know.
You don't know.
You don't know.
There's
no way
idea.
to guess. You're only projecting what you think based on past experiences, but you don't know. The sicknesses and health, rich or poor or whatever, I don't think you know until you
don't.
You get there.
You don't.
People are like, oh, it's unconditional love. There's always conditions.
It's like you're going into it with a wing and a prayer. And we were talking.
And you don't know who you are at 20.
No.
You certainly don't know who they are at 30. Like, everybody is changing in 10-year blocks of time. And you kind of hope that you can navigate these roads together and grow and share at the same pace and the same circumstances. And then things can come up in life that'll be like, oh, we are going in different paths here and we have a different outlook on things.
Yeah.
And if I, get through these 5 years, well, I might have 50 more to go. How do I want to spend those 50?
It's so true. No 2 people grow at the same rate. No. I mean, it's impossible.
Especially boys.
And then you're the person that has this life-altering diagnosis. You really start doing some serious soul searching. And then you start trying to do things to grow personally and make your life worthwhile. And so now I'm taking this trajectory that's very different, and he's staying in the same place.
Were people in your life saying that this is not a good idea to get out of a marriage when you are going through a health crisis?
So I only shared with a really close circle of people, and I got mixed feedback. And you know, I think at the end of the day, what I needed to be comfortable with was I could walk away, and that's a huge risk. I could end up sick and by myself for the rest of my life. And so the process I went through was probably a lot more discovery about myself than I would have had I not been diagnosed with cancer. But at the end of the day, I decided that even if I had to go this alone, that at this point in my life, that was going to be better for me than staying in this relationship. And it took me...
Mostly because you wanted to control what you knew you could control, and he was a variable you could not control or count on.
I think it was, I was so tired, not from the cancer, just from life. I was so tired that I could not manage the stresses and strains of this relationship. And I just was so, I got to a point where I was so unhappy. And I look back on it, and not all of that was fair to him. I realize that now.
Right. If the cancer doesn't happen at some point, maybe when the kids are grown, you get to this same point. And
well, I feel like I didn't give him enough grace for his position in the situation. I know that now.
Right.
I didn't know it then, because he was just as scared as I was.
Right. The unknown to him, the what's going to happen in the last, I mean, he probably has those doubts too. Can I do it?
Right.
I can't tell her that I have doubts whether or not I can do it. Like, you don't want to, it's hard enough for men to be vulnerable and not be superheroes anyway, but to have a conversation like, hey, I don't know where this is, or I don't know what to do. And, you know.
I think at the end of the day, though, the two of us didn't have those types of communication skills to get ourselves out of that loop.
How did the kids respond?
The kids, interestingly enough, we are a super open family, and they were kind of with us every step of the way. So by the time we actually got separated,
They were like, we get it.
yeah, we had had a lot of conversations with the kids previously. So they were prepared, they were ready. And
at the point you got separated, where were you on your health journey? Were you done with all your surgeries? Were you between like 5 and 6 surgeries?
yeah, I was, I think at 6. So by no, I wasn't in the clear. I don't feel like I'm in the clear today. But what I can say is that once I started taking care of my emotional health and kind of shedding some of those things that I was resentful for or that created constant stress and anxiety, my recurrences started getting further apart. So knock on wood, I am 4.5 years with no evidence of cancer, and I have been divorced for 4.
So the thing that a partner can do when somebody's going through a crisis like that is not so much take away the worry of the crisis and the stress of it, take away the worry and the stress of everything else. Does that make sense?
I think we can dummy it down. I think we can dummy it down to, it's okay that you're scared. I'm scared too. That's it.
Yeah, I get it's okay to be scared.
It's okay to be scared.
Even if you're just scared of the unknown. That's scary too. From the time you're 2 years old.
Right. And
we're always scared of the unknown.
I have your back. If something happens, trust that I'm going to make it okay. Our kids will be fine. And show me that. That's all I needed. I didn't need some big declaration. I just
You need him to say, like, let me get the paperwork out and let's go over this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
And
hindsight, it seems simple, but I get if these were the patterns of behavior, it's tough to change that in a moment.
I think that I do really believe the relationship you start with is the relationship you carry throughout. I think you can make some changes to it, but I think it's really hard 20 years down the road to start changing your roles.
Well, the cancer exists in your system 8 to 10 years before it manifests itself, and the cancer was in the relationship before something happened to shine the light on it too.
And, I'm really good now when somebody else has a really tragic event happen in their life. I didn't used to be. But if somebody comes to me and they, have a really tragic event, I'm really good just sitting in their discomfort with them because nobody wants you to fix it. They just want to know that you're there and you will listen and you will sit in their discomfort. And I think with spouses, you both have so much discomfort that you can't weed through kind of all of that noise to just sit with each other, not try to fix each other. Like, we are in a shit show together.
That's marriage.
That's marriage.
That's the relationship for you, great love listeners. Are you at the point now where if you sneeze, you don't freak out? You're like, that's just a sneeze?
Yeah.
Because you have to live that way. Like, you can't turn total hypochondriac.
No, I went the opposite. I'm not a hypochondriac at all. Because part of living for 8 years with stage 4 colon cancer is getting comfortable with the unknown. I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring.
Yeah, none of us do.
No.
Right, so it's not that different. It's just the perspective of how much you say that to yourself.
It's a huge practice.
Yeah.
It's a really hard thing to learn.
Yeah, but as we say on this podcast, sometimes there's magic in maybe.
Yeah.
And you don't know. Maybe's the unknown. All right, tell everybody about your podcast, because you have a lot of these conversations, and some of them are tough, and all of them are enlightening. So I recommend it. So tell them about it.
So the podcast is called To Be Continued, and it really, I think all of us have situations in our life that we were not trained for, we didn't predict, and a lot of times it really changes the course of our future, both for the good and sometimes for the bad. And so the podcast, we just really talk about those things and we normalize them because we're all thinking them. We're all going through it. We're all feeling it. And sometimes it's just really comfortable knowing that somebody else feels that same way because we don't have these conversations at cocktail parties.
You gotta say the hard part out loud.
We don't say the hard part out loud.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is so healing just to say it out loud.
All right. Well, thank you for doing this. I know
You're so welcome.
It's hard to have these conversations and, it's hard to make it relevant. But, as I always say on these podcasts, I don't necessarily want people to listen to you and think that's you. I want people to listen to you and think that's me. And there's a lot of people who are going to listen to your story and think that's me, whether they're in a relationship, we're in a relationship, looking back, all of us, when you're in it, you go through this stuff and it's how you react to it and handle it. And most importantly, how you communicate about it and take ownership of it that sort of factors into the outcome more than anything else.
Well, and I think the beautiful part about my story is obviously Scott and I did get divorced and we're great friends today. I would call him in a heartbeat if I needed something and vice versa. Yeah. So sometimes relationships are...
Now you can call him if you needed to. Now you can count on him.
But I wouldn't call him to have him talk about my big life's problems. But I think we're all meant to be where we are.
Well, there you go. All right, this was great. As far as us, as always, like, share, follow. Please review this podcast as well as To Be Continued. Your reviews mean a lot in the podcasting ecosystem. Shoot us an email, greatlovedebate@gmail.com, with all your questions, thoughts. If you have something to pass along, your own cancer crisis story or anything else, we will do so. And go to greatlovedebate.com. We are doing our 10th season of live. I'm not sure how many shows. I'm getting calls. I might do them or whatever. But we are going to kick off our 10th season of the World Tour in February. So maybe I'll kick it off on Valentine's Day. It's probably going to be in Florida. Those are the venues that I'm most likely to do a show in. I'll just say that. Money talks. And remember, as always, at The Great Love Debate, we never stop making love. See you next time.